Well, hi everyone, Craig Dyer, Training Director of Christianity Explored Ministries here, and we thought today it would be helpful just to give perhaps a little bit of an introduction to how you actually run the Christianity Explored series on the Zoom platform. Let me begin by saying this is not the masterclass. This is the Muppet class, and I'm the Muppet. And the reassurance for you there is that if you're not very technically adept, then join the club. And the big encouragement to you is if I can do it, anybody can do it. So I'm just going to talk you falteringly through my own experience of running it. And it's brilliant to have some friends of the ministry, some of our CEM ambassadors and others who are with us this morning just to help us to do that. So the idea of this is just as a little bit of a training resource that you can use with your church family, perhaps to encourage you to get started. There was a day, I think back to it, when Zoom meant an ice lolly. There was a certain flavour of ice lolly that was called Zoom that I really liked, or it was a song by Fat Larry's band. And that's all the word meant to us. But now, obviously, with lockdown, and we all wish we'd taken out, we'd invested in Zoom perhaps at the tail end of last year because we'd be very wealthy by now. I heard this week that they've gone from having about 10 million calls a day to 300 million calls a day on the Zoom network. And the reason I mention it is just because it's been so helpful and so useful in terms of using the Christianity Explored series. There is a line in Fat Larry's song that says Zoom, my whole wide world went Zoom, and that is the story for so many people, and many of us are already fed up with it, but there certainly is an advantage in this, and it is remarkably useful as we try to do evangelism in this way. It's proved to be a great platform for Christianity Explored evangelism, and I'll try to show you why that is. Speaking, wearing my hat as an associate pastor in Harper Church in Glasgow, we, God willing, will come to week 5 of our Christianity Explored this Monday night. So we've been enjoying doing that, and I'll say a little bit more about that informally later on. But some churches in the UK and overseas have gone right through the whole series and are now into a second series. Some have gone on to do Discipleship Explored or Life Explored. So we are thrilled and excited about that. Now let me share a little PowerPoint presentation, and having made you all very welcome, and those who are viewing later, you're so welcome. Let me just say a little word about the backdrop and some of the technical stuff on Zoom. I think the most helpful thing I can say initially is that I cannot recommend highly enough that you find someone who is comfortable with tech if you're not. And even if you are comfortable with tech and you're going to be running the course, find someone else who would maybe love to serve in that way, who could be looking after the technical side of the Zoomcast when you're looking after the normal hospitality side of welcoming people to the CE series and so on. It's tremendously helpful if you don't have to worry about that when it comes to setting up security and the breakout rooms and so on. So that's what I've done, and I've found that really helpful, and that would be a top tip for you. Just to show you this screen here in terms of security, we found it very helpful to enable the waiting room, and it means that as people are arriving, you might be praying with your little group of leaders online just in advance of your CE time beginning, and so it's helpful to have people going into a waiting room. You'll be told about who they are, and you can welcome them then into the main Zoom room. The other advantage is, obviously, from a security point of view, it'll prevent you being Zoom bombed if you don't know who the person is, and you can, it's just useful to have that facility. Enable chat, enable them to rename themselves. That's very helpful, so that you can properly see who's on the call and call them by the appropriate name. Some people are using someone else's device, for example, and you can be calling to Pat and it's Mick who's on, or something like that. And then don't allow share screen. Again, that's just a little security feature that reduces the likelihood of you being so-called Zoom bombed by somebody taking over and showing something unhelpful. The other thing is just to draw attention to what happens along the baseline. If you go to participants, press the participants button, you'll see this little white box appear on the right hand side of the screen, and the first little click is raise hand. It's such a helpful thing. If you have a relatively small group, maybe under 10 people, you can see them all. If you're spilling over to 2 pages of Zoom, so to speak, so that you don't see all the faces at the one time, then it's a really useful thing just to ask people to navigate towards raise hand. And if they have a question, a point they want to make, a comment, an observation, then that's a great way of drawing your attention to it at the appropriate times for that. In order to have breakout rooms, you need to have the Zoom Pro. You don't get this feature on free Zoom. So I think it's about £12 a month for that. And it's well worth it. You can assign a certain number of people to a certain number of rooms. It will do it for you automatically, or you can do it manually. And again, this is where having someone in the background doing this for you is a terrific help, so that you're not having to be thinking about that. You can be welcoming people, chatting away to them, asking them how they're getting on, while all the time someone in the back who's not having to be concerned about that side of it is doing the technical stuff. And I gather from, as one of my daughters did it for us, and I gather from her that it is relatively intuitive, and you're able to switch people around as necessary, reduce or increase the number of breakout rooms, and I would just say have a play about with that until you're reasonably confident with it. The other main aspect in advance of actually beginning is that when you go to share screen, which is the big green logo down at the bottom there, the key thing on the next screen is that you'll see down there on the bottom left hand side, share computer sound. You've got to tick that box so that when you come to play, now this is assuming that you're going to use some kind of PowerPoint deck. I think it is the best way to do it, and I'll show you what I've used in a minute or two. And I embedded the film, and it meant that we were all able just to simply play that without me in real time downloading it from the CE website and then uploading it again. So it just meant there was no double lifting there. It was just purely coming from my system. But you've got to tick that box, share computer sound. It is a bit of a trap for the unwary, because if you don't do that, you will still hear it perfectly. But the others will only hear what comes through your microphone generated by your computer, as opposed to your system sharing its computer sound. So that's a key point to watch out for there. And that is one that you would have to do. You can't leave that to the tech expert. When you go to share screen, it's your screen, and you've got to tick that box. So I hope that's helpful as far as that's concerned. Well, now, very simply, we go to the little PowerPoint deck that I put together. And again, this is available to you if you want this. Just email us, or it's going to be available on ceministries.org as a resource for you to use and obviously to edit. But there was just this welcome screen to begin with as we saw people joining in. Most of the time I just had it on the view of everybody, and the fun of seeing people arriving and greeting friends and so on. That was all part of the sort of dynamic of that. I did do a little preamble once I thought everybody was here. Once everybody we expected was on the call, I did a kind of formal welcome to everybody, and I made 2 or 3 wee points. I'll just share them with you just now that you may find helpful. I said how thrilled we were that people had come along, that this was new for us to be doing it on the Zoom platform, and asked for their patience with it, but we're all learning, kind of thing. I said, we don't assume that you believe that there is a God. We don't assume that you believe the Bible is how he speaks to us. And you don't need to believe these things to come on this series. We assure them that they're not going to be coerced into making any commitments. Nobody's going to be twisting your arm in any way or behaving in any way inappropriate to you. But then I said, in the interest of absolute transparency, these two things that I've just said are true, but not because we don't care how this lands with you. We absolutely do. We're very keen to know what you think about this and how you feel about this. So that was a couple of the points I made at the beginning. And then I said, really, the next 7 sessions, if you stick with us, is like a test drive of the Christian worldview. I want to put into your hands the ignition keys, which is Mark's gospel. And I want to say to you, take it for a test drive. Compare it with your worldview. Compare it with all the other worldviews that you can think of. Throw any test at it you can. See if it withstands scrutiny. Test it to destruction. So that was my kind of preamble on that, in terms of setting expectations and what it was we were trying to do. I then gave them a simple outline in terms of what each session is going to look like. Probably not 20 minutes for any of these. I think it's been shorter each week, but approximately a third of the time on Bible study discussion, a third of the time on the DVD film, and a third of the time at the end just chatting through the whole impact of the evening. And then saying to them, I didn't make a lot of this on session 1, but as the series went on, I made more of it, that they're absolutely free to get in touch if they want to have a one-to-one conversation about stuff that they may not want to talk about on the Zoom. I drew their attention to, although we weren't streaming it from the website, as I've already explained, I drew their attention to the fact that they can go and look at the videos again anytime they like at christianityexplored.org/videos. And I encourage them to get the Bible app on their phone, or at least we were able to send them a PDF of Mark's Gospel if they wanted it, and that was available from the Good Book Company as well. And just to say, I had sent out in advance we had recruited them through email, through Eventbrite. So I had an email address and I was able to send them in advance a little summary of what each evening would look like, because we didn't have the handbook for them at that point. Although that would be, if you're organized well enough in advance, that's probably the best way to do it, is to have them sent out. And our friends at Good Book Company can make that happen. They can send them directly for you to the recipients. So a plug for the Bible app to get that on their phones, and then a brief overview of the whole series, as you would expect, so that they had a rough idea where we were going with it. We don't do the day away sessions, but I just tried to let them see what the outline was, the overview. It was then time for us to go, as it were, into our first Zoom room. And the thing to do is to remember to ask everyone to click join. So when I said, now we're going to go into Zoom rooms, the person who'd be looking after the technical side and who'd be pulling together and arranging the Zoom groups then initiates them, and something appears on the screen that says, you've been appointed to Zoom room 3 or something like that, and every participant has to click join, and then they go automatically to the breakout room. And obviously you have a leader in there then to take them through that. So that was the next point of the evening. And very simply, what we did on that first session was just these questions. What's your name? Where are you currently? What's your experience of lockdown been so far? So that was just very simple, straightforward stuff. Absolutely basic to anyone who knows about running a CE session 1. And then we went on to this question: what's the best news you've had in the last year? Because you'll remember on session 1, we're gearing up towards the idea of good news, the beginning of the compellingly good news about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So that's the kind of thing that we've been. And when I say the last year, I mean I don't mean just till January, because there hasn't been a huge amount, I guess, for most people. It's been a bit of a strange year. But, going back to this time last year kind of idea, you can work that out. We then brought them back together, and I reminded them about the importance of the Bible app. And I said to them, if you don't want to put that on your phone, the other thing you can do is go to BibleGateway.com and just punch in Mark chapter 1, and it will all appear there. So I'm working on the basis that they may not have a Bible and they may not want to download it. So this was just another way of making that available to them. And I had that on the PowerPoint deck. It was then time to introduce the main verse of the evening, which you can see here I just had on the screen, Mark chapter 1, verse 1, the beginning of the gospel about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. I explained that each week we're going to be looking at a key text of Mark's gospel. And this is the one for the first evening, just that very initial verse. And now I say we're going to look at a film where the ideas of good news are unpacked for us. And I asked everyone to remember, I remembered to mute everyone, but including myself. Otherwise, they will hear the sound of whatever's going on in the room over the sound of the film. So that's a helpful point. Just remember to mute everyone for the film, and then off we go. So we'll not take time to look at all of that this morning, but that's simply embedded into the PowerPoint. As I say, I found it really helpful to go and get the films from the Good Book Company and to be able to then put them on the PowerPoint. And it meant that I wasn't streaming live down from our website, the free version, and then putting it up again. That is going to make the potential for difficulty on the internet even more so. So then after the film, as you know, we go back into the Zoom room. And again, you've got to ask everyone just to remember to click join on the groups. It's brilliant that the system remembers the initial set of groups, so you don't have to reapportion them. They'll go back into the original breakout groups that were established in the first Zoom room. And then we're into these questions. And on this, you'll notice, if you're very observant, that I slightly reversed the order. And I put the big question first, that rather than normally comes last. We normally begin with, is there anything that intrigues or puzzles you? How do you feel about reading Mark's Gospel? And then we go to the big one. I reversed the order because I thought that probably it was going to be more difficult to draw people out on incidentals. And I think that proved to be the case, whereas we got a great conversation going about the big question. If you could ask God anything, what would your question be? Now, just for your encouragement, I have found the Zoom platform to be remarkably convivial, sociable. Actually, there is an intimacy that comes with it, which is very surprising to me. However, when you come to a question like this, I would just encourage you to redouble your efforts when people begin to talk about some big issue in their life. So, for example, in our first week, as experienced leaders, you would know this, often people talk about some gouging pain that they've suffered themselves, some significant loss, or some big tragedy that's come into their lives that is a mystery to them, and that would be their question for God. Now, if we were all in the same room and that question was asked, by your body language, by an intake of breath, by 1,000 visible cues, you would be seen to be absorbing the enormity of what the person is saying. That bit is a bit more difficult on Zoom. So what I'm just saying, on questions like that, and there are a few of them through the series, it's well worth going out of your way to communicate the fact that this is landing with you, that you're sensing the weight of what the person is saying. Just in order to compensate for all the things that would normally be evident if we were actually in the same room as one another. It's just so that people don't feel that they've been vulnerable enough to share the big issue of their life, and that suddenly we've all said, all right, okay, thank you for that. Well, what's your story? And moved on to the next thing or moved on to the next question. But rather to let them feel that the weight of this for them has been felt by us. Someone has described it as having your heart pulled out through your head when you talk about something like that. And there it is lying on the desk. And what we don't want is just to move on and leave someone's heart lying there in the vulnerability of that. We want to be able to, in some way, to say, look, thank you so much for sharing that. Evidently, that's a massive thing for you, and we consider it a privilege that you would tell us that. I can fully understand why that would be your big question for God if you had the opportunity to ask him. We're not going to insult you now with a quick fix answer. We asked this question in session 1 because if this exploration is going to be of value, we would want to help you get some perspective on that question. We want to help you get some answers perhaps to that question. So that's what we're going to put it out there on session 1. And as we look at who Jesus is and why Jesus came and what it means to follow him, as we go through the Gospel of Mark, then we would love to see if you get some help with your question. So I'm deliberately over-egging that this morning, just to make the point that I think that does need a bit of careful handling. And there are other key questions like that through the series that are like it. We then all came back together, and I just reminded them again that if they wanted to watch the film, they could do so again at christianityexplored.org/videos. And then I gave them a bit of a trailer for session 2. And I said, well, now that we know the beginning of the gospel about Jesus Christ, the Son of God, how does Mark justify his claims? One, that Jesus is the Son of God, and that Jesus is good news. So how does he actually justify that? Next week, we're going to look at that, and you will see the basis for Mark's remarkable claims here in chapter 1, verse 1. And then I just thanked them again for joining us. I said that I would send the reading plan to them so that they could follow on and do some study. In fact, I've just remembered I haven't sent it out for this week, so I've got to do that. I said we'll send you the reading plan, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. And then we popped back on so everybody could see everybody, and they all said goodbye to one another. And then the team just stayed and prayed for a few moments, and we just caught up with each other in terms of, as you normally would, how did that go? What can we improve for next week? So very simply, that's the sort of initial start that we made, and I felt that having it on PowerPoint was very helpful. It prompted me all the way through, and it meant that I knew where we were going, and it was all fairly sequenced as far as that's concerned. A couple of things just to say before we go to Q&A now. Maybe you've seen these already, but ceministries.org, we've put up quite a few articles that would be really helpful for you if you're interested in reading a bit more about this. Evangelism in lockdown, how to use the materials online, how to manage security for online courses, some terrific resources about that, advice on recruiting online and advertising, useful resources from across the web. They're all there at the moment for your reading and consideration. There is also a series of discussions that we've recorded, practical advice parts 1 and 2 from church leaders who've already been running the CE series, and just other conversation with friends and evangelists, just about the day that we're living in, the extraordinary opportunities of it, the strangeness of it. If you haven't had a look at them, then ceministries.org would be a great place to go. And do, by all means, if you haven't already done so, do please sign up for the email, the regular email that comes out, just giving you news about the ministry and so on that would keep people informed. So let me stop share now. That's pretty much it as far as what I did on session 1 was concerned. And I want just now to unmute everybody, and you can stay muted if you wish, but you're now in control of that. And just see if there are any questions. As I say, I am no expert, but there may be someone on the call who can help us if you have a question. Then we'd love to hear from you just now. Just either raise your physical hand or find your way to your little blue hand if you want to practice that, and press that button if there are any comments or questions. Ian.
Did you say that the PowerPoint sort of format is available on the website?
Yeah, it's just a little thing that I've made, but if you email me, I'll send it to you. No problem at all. Then you can edit it for subsequent weeks. Thank you. Tom.
Breakout room numbers wise, you said you had a group of about 10, so were you splitting them into like 2, 4s or 3s? What was your preference?
Yeah, and so Tom's asking there about the numbers. It's pretty much the same online as it is in real life. Probably 7 or 8 would be the maximum you would want to have in to encourage discussion, Tom. And again, that's a factor of the number on the group, the number on the whole series, and the number of leaders that you have that you're able to divide them up amongst. Just a little sidebar on that. For the last couple of weeks, because of our team, our leaders team being hammered by a virus, thankfully not COVID, I actually held them all together. We didn't go into groups because I didn't have enough leaders to do that with. So, and I just want to tell you, it's not a disaster. It's quite interesting actually how the dynamic is not that much different. I've noticed that we have people coming on, and I think this makes a great feature of the Zoom platform, that they want information but not involvement. So this is the kind of person who probably wouldn't come to one of our courses down at the hall or in a coffee shop or in someone's home. So there are many who will, thankfully, and that is such an important thing for them to see the gospel at work as well as hear it. But there are some people who are much more reluctant to do that, but this is ideal for them. And so don't be discouraged if you find that people don't even show their face. All you see is the name, and they're constantly muted, and they're not engaging. It's not necessarily that they're not enjoying it or benefiting from it. So that's something to bear in mind. And the style of this, when we're doing it on Zoom, is, in a sense, it breaks the rules because you probably will be doing more of the talking. But all the feedback I'm getting is don't worry about that. It may well be that on this particular mode of evangelism, doing CE online on Zoom, that it is slightly more like a TED Talk, that you constantly see, any comment, any question, keep throwing that out. But if it doesn't come, don't assume that it's a disaster, because I think the model does work particularly well for people who just want to hear what you've got to say without committing themselves by way of question or comment. Paul.
When you advertise your course, did you make known your Zoom code in the advert, or have you had people to contact you to get the code?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. That's a great question. The general advice is never publicly advertise your link code for joining the Zoom platform. So what we did was we had an Eventbrite advertisement on Facebook. Well, there was a proper advertisement on Facebook. And again, if you go to the article of that on ceministries.org, you can actually see it. You can edit it for yourself. You can contact the company and ask them to do that. Or there are other alternatives to make up your own advertisement. But that linked through to Eventbrite, which was simply a matter of them giving their email address. We put on the landing page of Eventbrite the participants' introduction, the video introduction to the series, so they can have a little bit look of that. and there was a short bit of blurb that I'd written just to encourage people to do that. So that was a very simple way for us to do it, and it meant then that all we did was put all of this information on a database and send out the link an hour or so before the first evening. So that's a great point, Paul. You wouldn't normally want to put out that information generally. Drew?
Just a technical question, Craig. In terms of the person who's doing the technical support and breaking up into groups, is that the person that needs to have the enhanced license soon?
Right. So thank you, Drew. So what happens is you would buy the professional series. It's about £12 a month upgrade from the free version, and once you have that installed on whichever computer, it doesn't actually matter. So in my case, I think I opened it up. Then I made Jill host, and she made me co-host. So being host is the key thing to do the puppet work behind the scene, to organize the breakout groups and so on. And me being co-host let me share screen and let me mute and unmute and so on. Although actually she did a lot of that on the technical side as well. So that's the key thing. You're all on the one Zoom program by the host, which is the upgrade version, and then you can make the other person host, and you become they make you co-host. So I hope that makes sense. It sounds a bit gobbledygook, but
it's easily done.
It's easily done. Yeah, thank you.
It is.
That's brilliant. Karen, I saw your hand.
Yeah, in terms of the people that came along to your course or other people that you've heard, who've run these courses, are these just random people who've seen your advert? Are these people who've brought and invited a friend? Do you have like the Christian and a friend kind of dynamic going on as well? Or what have you kind of experienced?
Yeah, good. Yeah, so both. The majority have been friends brought by friends. Mm-hmm. And in the recruitment, we really put that out to the church family and asked them to be praying about who they could invite, and said that it's actually an easier invitation at the moment because of the boredom factor, and also because of the lack of commitment. It's so easy to go on your screen, on your laptop, on your phone in your room, as opposed to going out to a meeting, down to the hall or to a coffee shop or something like that. So it's much easier. So we pushed on that, but through Facebook we got a couple of people, and we had no previous contact with them. So they saw what we were offering, and they came along. So it was a much smaller proportion, but it did serve in terms of reaching out to them at the moment.
With those randoms that have come, what are your intentions in terms of being able to follow up? Because presumably they don't necessarily have someone that's naturally going to do that because they weren't invited by somebody. Any thoughts?
Well, I think it's a matter of us just building the relationship with them, and then the expectation that it just depends where they are towards the end of the series. If they have grasped the gospel, if the Lord has opened their eyes and they begin to see who the Lord Jesus is, then we will have no hesitation about drawing them into our Sunday meetings on Zoom at the moment, and encourage them to go to the live stream and so on, that kind of thing. If they haven't, then I would still be saying to them, well, look, let's keep in touch as much as you want to do that. So it's all the same principles for how you move people on. And then we probably will be thinking about a follow-on course. We may well do Discipleship Explored, or we may try to find another way to engage them beyond that. But you're absolutely right. You've got to be thinking about your strategy for the different outcomes for different people. But again, I would say, don't be dismayed by people having a look and then disappearing again. It's actually still massive. If you think about it, if someone has come for 1 or 2 sessions and has heard something about the Lord Jesus and has had a reasonably good experience, seemed to enjoy it, then they disappeared. Disappointing though that is still so much better than them not having heard anything. And you just never know when that seed planted in the back of their mind. You just never know the day when they might come back to us, when they might remember it fondly and come back round again. And I think, to be honest, that has been our experience with those who came with no contact. They've been much more sporadic in their attendance, and I'm just having to adjust my expectations in that regard so that I'm not discouraged by that. But I'm just saying, look, it's amazing that they came at all.
Thanks.
Thanks, Colin. And then Colin Adams.
Yeah, just a related question to one earlier about friends. So are the friends coming on the online course with the person? And related to that, are you giving thought beforehand to what groups you're going to put people into? So are you putting certain folk together and giving thought to that?
Thanks, Colin. Yes, we did. We knew, and we built up the registration through Eventbrite. We had the database. We were able to do a little bit of work on that in advance. So I gave Jill an idea of who I thought would be good in groups. And if I knew that a Christian friend was bringing a friend, I put them in the same group unless they asked not to be. So you've got the flexibility to pre-arrange all of that. But then there is a random factor on the night. Someone shows up who's brought a friend. You didn't know they were coming. You didn't know who their friend is. There is the opportunity, if you're quick-witted enough, as you probably are, to say at the beginning, now if you happen to have brought a friend, why don't you message us? So click on the message button, let us know who your friend is, and Jill, who's organising the groups, will bear that in mind and try and put you in the same group. So that there are ways of doing that if that's helpful. Great. Andy Nash, saw your hand there, brother.
So I've been really encouraged by using CE with people all around the world. Okay, so I have a contact in Russia who she meets with us every week, and we go through Christianity Explored. But I had the issue of how would I get the materials to her? She's in Russia. She didn't want to put her address online.
Yeah.
For sensitive reasons,
of course.
But the Good Book Company will send an e-book of the participant's guide. Yeah. So just bear that in mind, that you can buy it and then they will send it to you, to your email, and then you can forward it on to your participant. Yeah. And I think that's a really helpful way of getting around this, that sort of issue. But just be encouraged to see you running it on Zoom, you can engage with people all around the world.
Yeah, it's absolutely right.
Which is amazing. And I've used the CE Universal Edition, which doesn't have the videos. And I've used that with mums who we know through our church, but English is their second language. And using the PowerPoint, putting it yourself onto the PowerPoint, and talking them through that is another helpful way.
That's brilliant, Andy. So encouraging and so helpful to hear that. Yeah. Very helpful.
Could I ask, is CE in Russian at the moment?
Interesting. We were just talking to Ksenia Bondarenko yesterday, and she is in Ukraine and has the Ukrainian translation of Life Explored, and has just developed it, is just beginning the process, I think, in Russian. I think we have an unofficial in Russian. Can I get back to you on that?
Yeah, Andy? That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll get back to you on that. I think we have, I think we do have something in Russian. Yeah. Chris.
Question along the lines of the breakout rooms. There is a function whereby that it'll automatically divide people up and put them into breakout rooms together. Now the question is that when you come back and you go again, does it put people back in the same groups?
It does.
Or not?
It does. Yes.
It does. When it makes that decision, that's the case. Okay. I wasn't clear on that. So
yeah, whether you let it do the random composition of the groups, there's a function it will do it automatically, or you can prearrange the groups. In fact, if you're sufficiently tech savvy, there's a way you can upload your spreadsheet directly to it, and it'll do all that. I mean, goodness knows, I don't even know anybody who knows how to do that. But there is a way. The feature is there.
But you've heard.
I've heard. I believe it's out there somewhere, but I don't. I'm not. It's certainly never going to come across my desk. But yes,
Right.
It does. The main point is that it remembers what the formation of the groups was from the first breakout session, and we'll put them automatically back into that in a second.
Presumably, you have to then keep a note of that for the next week.
Yes. Well, in our case, we had preset it.
Okay.
We had it on the spreadsheet, and we were working to that. But if for any reason you change it around, correct, you have to remember who was where. Yeah. Brilliant.
If you do upgrade and buy the pay for it, you get invited to webinars fairly regularly on Zoom, because they're updating it all the time. It's a very sophisticated bit of kit, really. So that there you can learn how to update your spreadsheets.
Absolutely. And the security has improved dramatically since the early days. You just don't hear so much about Zoom bombing nowadays. They've really got on that. Ian, were you going to ask?
Yeah, sorry. When will this recording be available on the YouTube channel?
It might even be available later today.
Okay.
Yeah, but as soon as possible. We'll try and get it up as soon as possible to catch the moment.
So one more question.
Go for it, Karen.
When you've broken people into their different groups, is that entirely led by the leaders without a share screen function, or are you sharing the screen with the questions in those breakout rooms?
Good. Well, I sent the leaders a reduced PowerPoint presentation with what they would need if they wanted to do that. So they were then able to have it uploaded on their machines and share screen. And the thing with that is, I think what I've learned with that is, it's much more interesting to see the faces than it is to see the question. So show the question, go back to the faces, because you're going to be able to remember the question anyway. Again, I was flicking back to the text, and I would try to take them to the specific part of the text, but then I would quick as I could and go back to the faces, as I think it's much more engaging when people see others looking at that. But that's how we did it in that case. I sent it out around the leaders. Great, that's a great point. Ian.
Perhaps I'll let me go on, Barbara.
I was just wondering, normally, obviously, it's really about building relationships, etc., isn't it? And often, after courses, people want to hang around and talk and maybe ask further questions, whatever. How does that work? Or do you just have to say, cheerio, see you next week?
Yeah, I think it is a different kind of socializing. You certainly can't stay around and meaningfully have a chat in the way that you obviously you can, but like we're doing just now, we're talking. I did a short presentation, we're chatting about it, so it feels quite convivial. But we normally, as we bring it to a close, we pretty much let them away. We've been running just under an hour and a quarter each evening, and I've wanted to keep faith with them that they could go. And I get the sense that if I said, now go if you must, we're going to stay and chat, there'd be a reluctance, right? Do we go? Do we stay? Am I going to be rude to go? So I kill it. I say, now we're going to finish now. Great to see you. See you next week. But remember, get back in touch with us. Email us. We'd love to talk to you. We'll find a way of doing that if you want to do that. Yeah. There's no two ways about it. The social aspect of meal, message, mingle is dead on this. You can't do it the way you can in a live course. But what I'm arguing is that it's still very worthwhile.
Yeah.
You can still get the gospel out. You can still build a relationship, and it actually suits some people more. Philip, I saw you had full degree working.
I just wondering whether you've got any experience using the chat function. I've been in webinars where that's been used quite well to allow everybody to contribute without actually having to say something publicly, but they've been able to type something publicly. Have you had any experience on, anyone had any experience of that with CE using the chat function?
I haven't. I mean, other than I'm just noticing now that very helpfully already this morning, two of our number have put up a general notice that you may already have seen that. Paul King went to everyone about sound quality, and Chris Pierce coming in the back of that. So that's obviously a very, very useful function. Has anybody got any experience of that?
So our CE has migrated from being in real life onto Zoom because we were halfway through the course, and we were quite small, so we knew each other, so we were all able to chat together. Just in a slightly larger group, and we've tried it with church, it does seem to be a way to enable everybody to make a contribution. Without all the difficulties of the visual cues about whose turn it is to speak when.
Very good.
So
that's really helpful. And I having seen it operate this morning, Zoom group chat, I think it would be a terrific thing for those who maybe wouldn't naturally find their voice.
I was in a seminar that used that, and people could just ask a question anytime during the seminar, and at the end the Q&A was led by the host and the co-host asking some of the questions, and actually then some of the questions that were key and useful for everybody and pertinent to what was being talked about were answered live. But then what they did was then get in touch with the individual who'd maybe asked a question that wasn't answered live, and they could have that one-to-one conversation.
That's really helpful.
Rabbit trails, so that was useful in a different context, so maybe it could work with CE too.
I think that sounds eminently sensible and very, very adaptable. Thank you, Karen. Paul, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was going to say use the chat function in some different contexts. I think it is very useful. In Bible studies, it's quite good because you can actually write. I don't know if you do Bible studies where you give everyone the questions beforehand, but you could give one question at a time, but put it on chat function so people can read. So if the sound isn't great or they didn't pick up, then they can read. So that's quite good. There's a way of sort of feeding things in. It can be distracting. If you've got a large group, bigger than this, you get a flow of comments, and then you like this because you're looking at it, trying to read it.
Yeah.
So you start to lose that aspect.
Yeah.
This is gold. This is gold. This is really helpful. Very useful to help people think this through in advance. Friends, it's 10:58, and I promised. Oh, Peter, let's hear from you.
Just a quickie on the chat function. I think it's a very helpful function. I think there's potentially an issue with safety if you get the settings wrong. So private chats can be useful where we already know each other, but where people don't know each other well and there's a private chat function, I think that needs some careful thought whether you use that. So chat to everybody, chat to the hosts, but bilateral chats need some careful thinking whether you're going to enable that function.
Thank you for that, Peter. So that's something to give some consideration to. Another little trap I found was that if I have my WhatsApp desktop in use, as I often do, and then I go to share screen, something can happen, and all of your messages appear on screen. So kill WhatsApp before you go. See, that's a ministry saver right there.
Well, it's also good to make sure that that if how you're guarding your mic. I've known people to make terrible, have very embarrassing situations because they walked away and their mic was still on.
Yeah, there are some classics.
I think Gordon Brown did that.
We can maybe continue this after we stop the recording. Let me just say a massive thank you to all of you for being part of this today, been really helpful. And thank you to those of you who are watching this little resource. We hope it will be a real stimulus and encouragement and blessing to you as you prayerfully put a toe in the water and get started. The issues are still the same. The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers, but our God is the God who opens blinded eyes, and he does it as his people in his name, by the power of his Spirit, open his word and speak of the Lord Jesus. So we ask the Lord's richest blessing on you as you do so. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. That's been a great blessing to us.